Good day, everyone. On behalf of the CSJ Center for Reconciliation and Justice, welcome to this Justice and Spirituality on Screen discussion of Cabin in the Sky, the 1943 musical feature film directed by Vincente Minnelli, based on the Broadway musical written by Lynn Root. My apologies to you all as we are unable to hold this discussion and screen the film at the studio due to pandemic-related challenges, but we will be back at the Playa Vista campus in March. And as always, I invite anyone tuning in to join us for the next live discussion and screening. With me today is musician and theologian Kim Harris, assistant professor of Theological Studies at the Loyola Marymount College of Liberal Arts, and our returning champion, author and film critic Rose Pacatte, founding director of the Pauline Center for Media Studies in Culver City. And I'm your moderator, Michael McNaught, and it is a great pleasure to host this discussion on this important piece of film history. As always, we begin with opening thoughts on this film. Kim, let's go ahead and start with you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here with both of you. I know that the feelings that I have for this film are complex. Definitely, because there's part of me that is appreciative that they had an all-black cast. I definitely appreciated that, and getting to see Ethel Waters and Lena Horne and Duke Ellington and so many wonderful Black actors and musicians. I definitely was appreciating that. And then on the other side, to see some of the stereotypes played out that have been historically stereotypes that were used of African Americans, and some of the ones that continue to this day in various forms. So, I have both of those things going on at the same time. I definitely loved hearing the music, and especially I was just enchanted by Ethel Waters' voice, just really loving, and Lena Horne, of course. So, like I said, my feelings are definitely complex.
Rose, how about yourself?
Well, I was quite captivated by the film. I mean, I went into it knowing that, of course, it's an all-black cast, but of course it was written and directed and made by white filmmakers. So it's going to have a white perspective. And even the scholarship shows that, that many people agree that this is a Black story of Black people through the lens of a white filmmakers. And that's fair enough. And as a white person, I'm thinking, I just kind of loved the movie. I found there was comedy. I loved the music. I loved the relationships, and the characters were full. You knew who they were, but yet there are problems there too, because that you do see the childlikeness, the whole religiosity, the over religiosity in some ways, and things like that we see coming up when African Americans are portrayed in stories. But so I'm conflicted as well, the way America was conflicted over the film when it came out. Some towns in the South, of course, took it out of theaters immediately. One sheriff showed up in a theater and closed it down after 30 minutes. But it kind of reflects the complexity of white America's relationship with Black America. On the other hand, it's a valid piece of art. So I understand what Kim is saying, even from my perspective, as a non-Black person.
No, thank you both. And this is one of these films I think continues to challenge us, even in present day. Kim, perhaps you could take us through a bit of what the tropes and stereotypes are of African Americans in both perhaps historical U.S. films and maybe even present U.S. films.
Yes, well, taking a look at it, there's the idea of African Americans that would be content with their lot, and that came up originally as an idea of justifying enslavement. and continuing to justify the treatment of African Americans after the time of slavery. So that contentment. And I was looking at this film, and as they were singing about having a cabin in the sky and having a plot of land to plow, and I thought to myself that had that idea of, we're content with what we have, as opposed to saying, we're not going to plow anymore. We're not going. So it was interesting to see that one played out. The stereotype of the mammy figure that also goes along with the strong Black woman willing to self-sacrifice, and Petunia plays that out, the Ethel Waters character, in the way that she is self-sacrificing. Now, what is interesting about her, though, is that she is not that all good kind of character. I appreciate it when she shows them that she remembers how to throw dice, and she shows them that she remembers how to dress up. So I appreciated that bit of complexity in her character, even though she is giving that, self-sacrificing idea. You have the sapphire, sassy Black woman, and of course that Lena Horne plays that as Georgia Brown, and the way that she is embodying her character. You have the idea of the childlike character, and so Eddie Rochester Anderson, he really plays that out. The idea of not being able to read, and he does work hard, so he doesn't, when they show him at the job that he gets after he recovers, they do show him working hard, but it's interesting when he doesn't read and he doesn't ask for help, so that was interesting. You had the idea of the lazy character, and one of the angels definitely was embodying that laziness. And there's so many more of the tropes of the Uncle Tom character, the magical Negro, or the noble savage kind of character. Now, what was interesting, though, because it's an all-Black cast, these characters, and even though it was written by white people, because they're in relationship with each other, some of these characters don't play out in that same type of way that they would. So those are just some of the tropes that continue to be played out in this film.
Is a follow-up to that, Kim, do you see the film makers in any way obviously employing those tropes, but do you see any sense that they're challenging those tropes, or are they just simply employing them because those are the tropes as filmmakers that they use? Not to excuse the use, just out of curiosity.
Well, no, it's interesting. As I said, as I was looking at the Ethel Waters character, she did, she wasn't that, all good all the time, and so I was, a little bit surprised about that. And I thought, okay, yes. So she does remember. And I think she has a line. It's something like, sometimes when you're fighting the devil, you've got to hit him with his own pitchfork. And that line really jumped out at me, because she was willing to do what she needed to do. In thinking about some of the other characters, in seeing what happened at the church, I know that, I was comparing the musical numbers. They took some of the spirituals out that had been a part of the musical on Broadway. Some of them aren't there. I mean, one of my favorite, Wade in the Water, I wish they'd had that. But they did use Old Ship of Zion. So there is that religiosity, and it's not only in the church, but it does play out all the way through the film. And I didn't necessarily find that being, overly religious, but it definitely is playing out through the film, and there might be some that could think that it would be, a bit too much as it was being shown in the film.
Rose, from a historical perspective, thinking just of the business, traditional Hollywood, how does a film like this get made in 1943?
Well, that's a really interesting question, but I think it comes off of the success of the Broadway play, which is why MGM picked it up and was willing to give it a pretty substantial budget for the times. And it came out during the war, so it was certainly offering audiences something completely different than what they were used to. In fact, I think between, I have the years written down here in my notes somewhere. Between 1927 and 1954, there were only 6 all-Black motion pictures that were made. And one of them was Green Pastures, which I saw a long time ago. And then there's this one, Cabin in the Sky. So it was still very unique. So it might have had some kind of a pull for that reason. But another thing that, just on a historical note, if I might, just read the notice that went up, the credits run first in the old movies. And then this message ran. It says, throughout the ages, powerful and inspiring thoughts have been preserved and handed down by the medium of the legend, the fable, and the fantasy. The folklore, I videotaped this. The folklore of America has origins in all lands, all races, all colors. This story of faith and devotion springs from that source and seeks to capture those values. I'm not sure if that's condescending or if it's reaching out a hand and saying, let's appreciate the Black culture that we have in this country, because it doesn't say the other or anything like that. For some scholars, it implies that, however. So, but I thought I'd never seen a prologue to a film like that. I don't know about you, Kim, if you've ever noticed anything, but so it's really setting this in a historical place. This is still 11 years before Brown versus the Board of Education, and 21 years before the 1964, the
Civil Rights Act.
Civil Rights Act, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of helping to maybe till the soil a little bit.
Yes, I don't know. Voting rights. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's even that part in it. Even though I definitely noticed that he wasn't reading that little Joe was not reading his cablegram. When he receives it from the delivery person and he makes an X on it instead of his signature, the delivery person says, "Oh, what is this? Are you voting?" And that really jumped out at me because I thought, so there's a piece of it felt like a little bit of code in there, where he put that X. Mm-hmm.
But, just while you mentioned Little Joe, we might come back to him later. There's a song that Ethel Waters sings, that Petunia sings about something about a thing called Joe. Magic happens or something with a thing. They don't say a man
happiness
called Joe.
Is a thing called Joe. Happiness is a thing called Joe.
Why didn't they say man? That bothered me. Mm-hmm. The idea of a thing. So it's not a perfect film. Anyway, and
I wondered why they were calling him Little Joe. Now, I don't know if that was because of how tall, his stature, and and why they would, why he would be called that. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about, though, the music, if we can. And Kim, I'll start with you, being a musician and a composer yourself. This is a musical. Absolutely. Help us unpack the importance of the music in this film.
Well, one thing that I noticed that I really did appreciate is that the arrangements were by Hall Johnson. So you take one of the towering figures of arrangements, especially of the historic Negro spirituals, of the day, and have him do the arrangements. So I definitely appreciated that. And so when you heard the choruses and the singing, it was, quite well done, very rich and complex, as it would be because of Hall Johnson doing the arrangement. And I think, as I said, I wished that more of the spirituals were in there, but I do understand about, how long it would be if they had all of the songs. I found the music to be memorable. I've definitely, because I've been watching the film a few times these past days, I've got these melodies in my head, and I definitely appreciate that. Now, what I didn't see was music that, I didn't see and hear music that I would call, like a stereotypical kind of, we're trying to show Black people in that, perpetual hallelujah kind of phase. So I did not see that. And even when the dancing was going on, there was tap dancing by, some really amazing tap dancing that happened. There was some incredible swing dance that happened. So some of the very skillful ways that African Americans were inhabiting the dance world at that time were shown as a part of the musical numbers. And so that I really did appreciate.
Along those lines, the film, it's, like all musicals, the film is really rich in its presentation of so many different art forms. Mm-hmm. Do you see that as an exercise of spirituality in some respects? Because to me, when I watch a film like that, I see all these forms and all these expressions coming out of people, artists, particularly dance, song, musical performance, art, in which the artist tends to pull deep from the well within themselves. I wonder if maybe you could speak a little bit to kind of how art can be or is or isn't an act of spirituality, or does it have a place in our spirituality?
Well, truly, I mean, I definitely always believe that art has a place in our spirituality. Now, and for me, spirituality is faith lived. So how were they living out their relationship with the divine, their relationship with God? How were they living out their God talk, their theology? Now, the songs that were chosen, they didn't feel to me as they were particularly filled with spirituality. Obviously, Old Ship of Zion and whatnot. Now, Cabin in the Sky, like I said, they were singing about an idea of what heaven would be like. And that was one of the ones that definitely I had a critique for that, because there was a way in which during the time of enslavement, masters would say, well, if you are Christian, they would say to the enslaved people, if you're Christian, you will go to heaven. Now, you'll still be enslaved, but you'll be in heaven. And that's what the song Cabin in the Sky sort of sound like. You're not going to be, your station in life is going to be exactly the same, but you'll be in heaven. So I wondered about that one in terms of spirituality. Now, thinking about life is full of consequence, that idea, the idea of, yes, you're going to, reap what you sow, etc. Like I said, I didn't necessarily find the songs full of spirituality. I think I was finding more of the spirituality in the way they were portraying the preacher and the church communities, the way they portrayed the angels and the devils and the demons. You know, I was finding more spirituality within that, and the way that they portrayed Petunia and her reliance on prayer. And that's where, for me, I was really finding more of the spirituality being played out in those scenes.
Rose, pivoting to you, if I might, this is a piece of historical film. I mean, this is a piece of history. This film is a piece of American history. How might we today in 2022 think about, and I ask you this as an educator, how should we think about or engage films from different parts of history, especially ones that might come from questionable parts of history?
Sure. I think the first thing we have to do is create the historical context of the film in which it's made, because it's going to reflect in many ways the world in which it's made, because it has to speak to the audiences of that time. And so creating that context, looking back to what America was like in 1943, still under the Jim Crow laws in the South, still, you know, all of these things going on. And yet we have this almost pleasantly presented story of, I saw heaven, hell, and purgatory very clearly delineated there in little Joe's path there. But how this is presented almost too simply, perhaps, for the context of the times. And to be able to comment on that is my favorite film that I use when I teach is John Ford's 1956 film, The Structures, which came out 2 years after Brown versus the Board of Education. And it's very much about racism, but it's with the white man and Indians and misogyny. So I think to create the context of the times in which it came out, you understand it better. And I think it would be the same with teaching Cabin in the Sky. What do you think, Kim?
I think so. I was just writing down, what was the name again of the John Ford film? Because I'm going
The Searchers.
Okay, yes.
And it's now in the American Film Institute. I believe it's in their top 10 of all time. But it made it from never being on the list to moving up the list. It's an amazing film.
Thank
about you. Flawed America and Manifest Destiny and all these other things. And so.
And in terms of the way that I would teach a film, first of all, because I'm teaching, courses in theological studies, we would be thinking about, what is the spirituality in this film? What do you see and what don't you see as a part of spiritual messages that would be a part of a film like this? There's always that thought of saying, yes, it has to be a part of the context. People are always asking me, what should we call the spirituals? So if you're hearing Old Ship of Zion, should we call them Negro spirituals? Should we call them African American spirituals? And in particular, I always like to call them historic Negro spirituals, because I want them to be set in their time period. And I think that we honor the creators by setting it into the time period. In teaching about this film, there are so many pieces of we can see so much of who we continue to be through watching this film. So thinking about Ethel Waters and Lena Horne, and the fact that you have a darker skinned brown skinned woman who's playing that figure of Petunia. And then you have Lena Horne, who is a very light-skinned person, and the fact that she's playing the Jezebel, the Sapphire. So talking about colorism, talking about some of those stereotypes that we spoke about. And in some of the scholarship that I was reading, there is very good material about how there are through lines from those stereotypes to films that are coming out now, even in 2022. So I think that can be very helpful, and that can help the students not only know about this historical film, but to give them a more critical eye as they're watching films that are coming out right now, and also encourage them, because in our classes we have people that are screenwriters and we have people that are filmmakers, to encourage them as they're thinking about the types of films that they want to make. And interestingly enough, it was just Family Weekend here at LMU, and the parents of a young man who's in screenwriting, they said, a young African American man, and they said, should he take films in African American studies? And I said, absolutely, because he needs to know this history. If he is a screenwriter, and especially these days, he might be the only person of color in the room of screenwriters, in the room of writers for TV, and also knowing this history and watching these films and all, I just think is very important as we're teaching.
Along those lines, Kim, and I would pose this question to both of you. This film, as you both shared, and myself included, it really does stir up mixed feelings. Any thoughts on how we might engage these films that create mixed feelings within the viewer? I think there's sometimes a tendency to either not include the film, maybe even sometimes just remove it from history. But this film is a piece of history. It is also a piece of art. It is certainly not without its controversy today. A lot of the scholarship there's not a consensus among scholars in terms of its virtues and values, but nonetheless is a film that audiences engage and creates mixed emotions. What are your thoughts on that? What would you say to a viewer that watches a film like this and has a similar response to you, that it creates conflict within the individual? Mm-hmm. How should the individual reconcile that conflict, or perhaps just be present to that conflict?
I think I like how you're saying to be present to the conflict, because we still have such a difficult time in this nation speaking about race. We're coming off of the whole controversy with what Whoopi Goldberg, said about the Holocaust and race. So, we can't talk about it. So I think through watching films such as this, it can help to give us some language that we can use. And I think, I definitely find that helpful. And I think viewing it through the lens of history and the lens of our contemporary times helps us to find some of those terms and ideas that we need to continue to speak about right now.
Do you know what I would do? I would love to, if I had a film class or a theology class, I would love to have them watch this and Black Panther and look at the difference between a film that's been written and acted by Black artists and what the story is, and or to take Cabin in the Sky and look at Jordan Peele's Get Out, which is so shattering to me, in the sense that I think I had for once a feeling of what it might be like to be Black in America, because Jordan Peele puts you in the situation of the Black person. It's an astounding film. But sometimes by looking at the two artifacts together, you're able to see even more deeply then and now.
Along those lines, Rose, I'm really grateful for both your points and advice on that. Along those lines, how should we, who should we be listening to? Here we have a film that is, quote, present is an all-Black cast, but still in the voice of a predominantly white Hollywood. Where should we be looking today? Well, whose voices should we be listening to as filmmakers in the African American tradition? Who should we be Googling and renting films on Amazon Prime or IMDb I don't know that there's blockbusters anymore, but who should we be streaming? Is that the term is that the phrase we should be using? Who should I be streaming?
I'm going to let Kim take that, but I want to say this. I don't like films about women that are made by men. I'm tired of it, especially the vision or the gaze of the white male. I'm tired of it. So if I want to, I would like to see more movies made through the gaze of the Black experience. But I'll leave it there. Kim can take over.
And I appreciate that, Rose, very much. Uh, I think that, I'm always asking who is in the writer's room? So we need to think about that. Who are the directors? What are the stories that they are telling? And I realize that so often, there are times when I find that I have been deprived, and I don't even know that I have been, because it's just been so much of trying to move ahead. What I say these days is that there are certain movies that I need to be very careful that I do not watch on a plane. And my latest one is the documentary Summer of Soul. And as that documentary shows, the incredible African Americans, the incredible Hispanic Americans, and those concerts in Harlem, I found that as I watched the Staple Singers and Mahalia Jackson and other people, I was just crying, so I'm sitting on a plane, just crying, because there is so much of which I've been deprived, and having pressed that down. So I'm always going to be asking, who are the filmmakers? Who's in the writer's room? Not only what the context is, but what is going to be the future? It's a jumping off place toward what? So I'm looking forward to, more movies, more documentaries that show my experience. So I think that, that is what I'm looking for, because there is a trove of tears inside of me, a longing, a hunger to hear my stories presented by people who have had similar experiences to me, or people who are African American that have had different experiences than I have had.
Well, I would certainly say we're in a time in which it would seem that we would be able to hear more of those cinematic voices. I know that Ridley Scott, the British filmmaker, recently said to a group of film students, and forgive me, I can't recall where, but there's no excuse for anyone not to be making a film right now, in the sense that the technology is readily available. The learning is readily available. Now, you may not be able to make a career. You might not be able to monetize the work, but between your iPhone and YouTube, there's no excuse for people to be making films. So I'm hopeful that we continue to hear more of these voices from a larger swath of the global community, as opposed to what's commercial and popular. So I'd like to close with this question, if I may, because believe it or not, the clock just keeps on ticking and we are running out of time. This is a musical. So again, I want to go back to this kind of question. And this is a question we've closed other films with, in terms of the importance of a particular theme that comes across. What do you think? What does this film say about the importance of music? And you have only 2 minutes to answer that question, as opposed to...
I'm going to just answer briefly. Music is art.
No, you've got time. Take your time.
Music to me is art, and it's within art that we can come to understand ourselves and others and the world and God so much better. So, and music, remember, goes right to the body, right to the eardrum. There's no mediation. The sound comes right to us, and we have an immediate emotional response to that. And then we can work with that. But it's music is beautiful, and I'm not a musician. I'm an appreciator. So Kim, I'll give it over to you.
Well, I really appreciate what you have to say there, Rose, because yes, music affects us physically. It affects us intellectually. We're listening to the word and the messages and the way they are repeated again and again. It affects us emotionally. As she sings about, as Petunia sings about Joe, even as we're wondering why she's calling him a thing, there is love that is coming through. Music affects us socially, the ways that we can make music together and present music together. And of course, it affects us spiritually and really connects us to the divine or to something bigger than ourselves. So, I appreciated this being a musical for sure. And as I said, these melodies are going to be going through my head, and I may even, try a little swing dance at some point.
We can leave the camera on if you'd like to.
Oh, no.
Do you know, in the convent, they always tell us, when you sing, you pray twice.
That's funny. I usually get the other. When I sing, they tell me to shut up. So, that's...
Well, I'm not saying they didn't tell me that too, but I'm just saying that's that's what they tell you.
Well, that's something we should all continue to do. With that, my friends, I think we can't top that. So my thanks again to you both, Dr. Pacatte, Dr. Harris. And as we close here, I would also like to extend my thanks to our colleagues at the Loyola Marymount School of Film and Television, Center for Religion and Spirituality, William Hannon Library, the LMU Vista campus, and all who contribute to the work of this series at the CSJ Center. We are certainly grateful for your time, efforts, and continued collaboration. Just as a reminder, today's discussion is the first of two on this film. The second will be on Friday, at which we will answer your questions, those of you watching us today online. Those of you, if you are watching, please leave your questions in the comments section of this video. Thank you again to all of who participated, and we look forward to concluding this conversation on Friday. Everyone have a lovely day.